Hello and welcome to the Snakes Are Us TV podcast. I'm happy to be back again for another episode. This is episode number 7 already, episode 7. So today we're talking about identification, snake identification. Okay, as you know, other things too that need to be identified, but mainly snakes. And this is something that can keep a snake person very busy. Is simply identifying snakes. It's a question. Man, everybody seems to have. What snake is this? And got a couple funny stories we're going to tell about this. But one thing that snake identification, one way this has really affected me and Southeastern Reptile Rescue here is I was trying years ago, many years ago, when I was trying to get people to know who we were and what all this is about. I had business cards made up, all these business cards made up, and had all our information, social media, all that kind of stuff. And I would do an event. I would go do a public speaking event somewhere, and I wanted to be able to give out our YouTube channel and our social media. And I would lay these cards on a table somewhere, and a few people might pick them up, but not everybody. So I was trying to think, how can I get people to really want to take this card? And so what I did is I came up with an idea, and my idea was all these people that needed to identify snakes, as I said, I'll put a phone number on the card, and if you text the number, we'll identify the snake. And the cards, I couldn't keep enough cards in stock. Everybody was taking them. And it worked out really well. And what's the number? I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not even going to give it out because it gets so many numbers, texts that come to it. It is ridiculous. And, I live here in Georgia. We don't just get texts from Georgia. We get them from all over the Southeast, all over the country, from all over the world. Yeah. One day I was sitting there and a photo came through and I was like, what snake is this? And I asked the location. It was Slovakia. It's like, okay, this is a European snake. So we get them from all over, which is really cool. The good thing about me identifying these snakes that come in by the hundreds sometimes is that every year I get to see when snakes start moving, which species start moving first. It's usually always your first ones are your brown snakes, your decay snakes, your garter snakes, then your rat snakes, and then the first venomous snakes that I start seeing are copperheads. So it's really cool to see those snakes kind of start waking up for the year and getting active with all the texts coming in about identification. Now, one thing about identifying snakes for people, though, is that some people who text me a photo of a snake, some of these are so terrified of snakes that when they see a snake, they don't try to identify what snake it is. They just choose which venomous snake they think it is, okay? A rattlesnake, a copperhead, a cottonmouth, a coral snake, a cobra, it's got to be one of those. And so when I send them the information back that this is a rat snake or this is a, whatever snake it is, some of them, can't fathom the fact that this is a harmless snake that's not going to hurt them or their kids or their pets. And this person who's asking for my help, who seemingly knows nothing about snakes, then wants to argue with me about my identification. I'm like, first of all, this is a very common species. I would not confuse a rat snake with a rattlesnake, okay? But I think sometimes what it is, if they send the photo, if I answer back just within seconds, they're like, well, he didn't even take time to look at it. Well, how long do I need to take to look at it? I mean, if I showed you a Rottweiler, a dog, and a Dalmatian, how long do you have to look at those two dogs to figure out which is a Dalmatian and which is a Rottweiler? It's instant because you've spent time looking at those snakes. You've seen them plenty of times, even though you may not own one. You've seen tons of photos of them, in movies. So you don't have to figure out, is this a Dalmatian? Or is this a pit bull? Which one? It's pretty obvious as soon as you see it. It's the same thing with snakes. To a lot of people, a snake is a snake is a snake. But when you spend every day for years and years and years and years and years looking at hundreds of snakes, when you see one, sometimes you may not know what it is, but you know what it's not. Okay, so some of these snakes are pretty easy to ID, but it's always funny the callers who are like, I don't know. I mean, you're saying this is a rat snake, but I don't even I don't even know if you know what you're talking about. But anyway, one request for identification that we get several times every single year, and some of you will know what this is called. I don't even know what these things are called, but people will call me and they'll send photos and they'll say, hey, how in the world do I get rid of all these snakes' eggs? I found there's a nest of snake eggs here, and these things have to go. They have to be from a venomous snake, and here in the Southeast, the only venomous snake that lays eggs is the coral snake. Our copperheads or cottonmouth rattlesnakes, they don't lay eggs. And well, speaking of that, how do snakes give birth? Well, there's a few ways. There's viviparous, oviparous, and ovoviviparous. There's 3 ways snakes give birth. There's live birth, which is like what your garter snakes have, your non-venomous water snakes, your boa constrictors, your anacondas. Your anacondas are a type of boa constrictor. So those have live birth. Your cobras, your pythons, your rat snakes, your king snakes, coral snakes, those lay eggs. But your pit vipers, your copperheads, your cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes, they don't do either one. There's a 3rd way. And on our YouTube channel, go to the video called The 3 Ways Snakes Give Birth, and we film it, and you get to watch it happen. Pretty cool. So, on a side note, but we'll get calls about eggs in people's yards, and they'll send me photos, and these snake eggs are just scattered all out in their front yard. They wake up one morning, and there's snake eggs everywhere. Of course, these are not snake eggs, but they think it is because people jump to the worst conclusion. They see a non-venomous snake, they assume it's a venomous snake. They see a mushroom, this fungus that's in their yard this morning, these little white tiny mushrooms everywhere, and they assume, oh, snakes have laid their eggs. If I don't get these gone, they're going to hatch any second. We're going to be overrun with snakes. And so explaining to these people that what they have in their yard are these little tiny white round mushrooms, whatever species that is, are not snake eggs. And so many people will argue with me and try to explain to me these are snake eggs. You obviously are not a real snake person. You don't know what you're talking about. I want to know what kind of snake eggs they are. So we deal with that as well. Another one that we get often as far as identification is people get really happy and really proud of the fact when they finally have an eastern indigo snake, the federally protected indigo, in their yard. And it seems like people are finding these indigos all over the place, and they're way outside of the range of where indigos even live. When they send me the photo, I explain, well, this is a black racer. This is not an indigo. And a lot of times they'll call it the blue indigo. Yeah, I got one of those blue snakes. I'm like, you have a blue snake? They're like, yeah, the blue indigo. And I know some people call that because it has an iridescence to it. But I've owned indigos. I've seen indigos in the wild. I've caught indigos in the wild. I've never seen one that even remotely looked blue. It does have an iridescence to it, but it's a black snake. It's black, okay? And people will see these black racers, and they will swear this is an indigo. Well, first of all, you don't even live, these people that are calling me don't even live near where indigos live. And then secondly, when they show me the picture, it's obviously not an indigo, but some people are just convinced of this kind of stuff. Now, speaking of indigo snakes, the eastern indigo is a federally protected species. And here in Georgia, where I live, it's a threatened species. And so we're doing education. It's really cool to have that kind of a snake to show people how, the emperor of the forest, that's what it's called, to show that snake. So many, many years ago, there was a breeder out of state who could legally breed eastern indigo snakes where he lived, because even though they're federally protected, they didn't occur in his state. So he could legally own these with no license and breed them and sell them and all this kind of stuff. Well, he found out about us, and he had an old indigo snake that was a retired breeder, and he wanted to donate it to Southeastern Reptile Rescue. So we contacted the state. We made sure we had the necessary permits. And I was going to be traveling from Georgia, a couple states north of Georgia, to meet up with this guy halfway and pick up this Eastern Indigo. And when I was going to do this, it was kind of like a time crunch, and I really, hadn't had much sleep. And so I pull over and I get one of these little energy drinks. And I don't drink coffee. I don't drink caffeine. I don't avoid caffeine, but I just don't seek out caffeine. I mean, if I drink a soft drink or, a Coke or, whatever, that's fine. And I'll drink sweet tea that has caffeine in it, but I don't seek out caffeine. If I'm really tired, I go to bed. Okay, that's my philosophy. But I was so tired, I didn't want to fall asleep, and I had to drive to get there. So I got one of these, these energy drinks, and never drank one before. This little tiny thing. So I'm driving, and I'm like, you know what? I'm starting to get tired. Let me just drink this, and it'll kind of pep me up, and and I'll get there and pick up the Indigo. I was going to be meeting the guy at a Waffle House, okay? So I downed this little energy drink, and I don't feel anything. I'm a big guy. Maybe I should have got 2 or 3 of these things, but I only got one. And so I drank it, and I don't know, 30 minutes go by, an hour goes by. I don't feel anything. So it comes time to pull up at the Waffle House. I pull into the parking lot, and all of a sudden, that energy drink hit me like a train, like a freight train. And I felt like I was about to die. My heart was racing. My face went white. I broke out into a cold sweat. I was just jittery and shaking. And I get out and I meet the guy, and I'm talking really fast. I know he thinks I'm on something, but it's probably not caffeine. And I'm like, look, I just drank an energy drink. I have to get some toast. I started craving toast for some reason. And I don't know why. I went into the Waffle House. I'm like, I need some toast. I want 5 orders of toast. And so the waitress was like, what? I said, I just drank an energy drink, and I don't know, I got too much caffeine. Give me some toast. I was craving toast. And so she brings toast, and I'm sitting across the table from the stranger who's delivering this indigo snake to me, and he's probably thinking, this guy's going to go sell this for drugs or something. What is he? And so I'm just shoving toast. There's crumbs going everywhere. And after I ate 5 or 6 orders of toast and drank some water, I caught my breath, and it subsided, and I was like, sorry about that. So where's the indigo snake? So never before that and never after that have I ever drank one of those kind of energy drinks ever again. So I can't handle a lot of caffeine, a little bit, but not too much. Now, so my voice, right now is a little weak. I've been doing some presentations. This week I'm at the Georgia National Fair. It's the largest fair in Georgia. They have over 500,000 people come through this fair, and it's an 11-day event. And I just finished the Spalding County Fair, which was a 9-day fair. And at that fair, I do shows on stage every day for 9 days. And then that fair ends. We have like 3 or 4 days to tear down our equipment here, set up our reptile exhibit and our stage and all this stuff at the next fair. And then the fair we're at now is an 11-day fair. At this 11-day fair, I do 42 shows on stage, 42 shows in 11 days. And I just finished a 9-day fair. So you can imagine my voice is a little stressed. So, but speaking of identification, I'm at this fair, and we have to have our reptile exhibit open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Okay, that's our exhibit. And then during that time, I get on my stage and do 4 shows per day. Well, it closes at 10 p.m., and every night at 10 p.m., they have this big fireworks display. I try to get out of there right at 10 because the traffic's bad as soon as the fireworks are over. As the fireworks are going off, I'm trying to get out of the parking lot. Everybody's watching them. So I get out of the parking lot. I get maybe, 20 minutes or so away from the fair, and I get a phone call saying, hey, we're trying to find the snake guy. I'm like, you got him? He's like, well, we're here at the fair. I said, well, I'm sorry. I'm going. You have to come back tomorrow to see the show. He's like, no, one of your snakes has gotten loose and is here next to your stage. I said, well, that's impossible. Our snakes are very secure. They can't get loose. We just checked on them. They're all there. He said, well, man, I'm looking at it. The people in the little barbecue restaurant next door to your stage at the fair caught it. And they have it in a pizza box, and is sitting on your stage. I said, well, this is not good. What does it look like? He said, I don't know. I said, what color is it? I don't know. Did you see it? Well, yeah. You saw it and you don't know what color it is? Oh, no, I don't know. It was just a snake. So I said, okay, I'm on the way back. So I go back and I get there. Let me try to I'm going to see if I can put this footage in here. I don't know if it'll work. Anyway, I get there and there's this big box on my stage. And when I see it, it kind of rocks a little bit. I'm like, whoa. And so I'm like, what is in this box? And I open the box, and in the box, in the very bottom, is a rat snake. Okay. Now, I have brought rat snakes with me to do education. I brought one for my shows. I brought another one for display. And so this rat snake in this box is not one of my rat snakes. This is not mine. Not only is it not mine, it doesn't exactly look like the rat snakes that we have around here. And so, there's rat snakes from, all over the place, several different states across the U.S., and they can all look different. And so I start looking the snake up, and I'm Googling different types of rat snakes. And then I asked them, I said, well, this big barbecue restaurant thing that y'all popped up here at the fair, this big tent and all this equipment, before you came here to Georgia, where were you? And they said, Ohio. And so sure enough, when you look up rat snakes in Ohio, this is the rat snake. So it's actually a gray rat snake. And we have gray rat snakes in Georgia, but the gray rat snakes we have in Georgia, South Georgia, and North Georgia don't exactly look like this one. So it appears that this snake may have hitched a ride in their equipment from Ohio to Georgia. We cannot release the snake back to the wild here in Georgia, of course, and I ain't driving it back to Ohio because we would have to know exactly kind of where it came from in Ohio. There's no telling where they picked this thing up accidentally. So this snake will remain in captivity and be used in education, the Ohio rat snake, which is pretty cool. Now, one thing that's pretty funny when we get quite often is people will come up to me and tell me snake stories and snakes they've seen, and they'll show me photos of rattlesnakes or different things that they've encountered, and that's always cool to see. But one thing that I get quite often, I wish I could find this video to show you, but one thing I get quite often is people that will come up and they'll tell me a story of a giant snake they've seen, okay? And often, it's most often a rattlesnake. And they'll say, this rattlesnake he had to be 12 to 15 feet long, okay? So I get that constantly. Well, genetically, that's impossible, okay? You can't have a 12-foot rattlesnake. Even if you see a 12-foot rattlesnake, you're not, okay? It's not a 12-foot rattlesnake. They don't exist. They can't exist, all right? But you can tell people they're wrong, but you can't convince them they're wrong. They just think, oh, he's just a smart aleck. He don't know what he's talking about. I saw a 12-foot rattlesnake. So I've just learned not to try to correct these people. There's no point in doing any of that. And so I had one guy, I was going to do a film project for a TV show, and I was supposed to meet the film crew to do a scout of the location where we're going to be filming at this bridge on this desolate dirt road somewhere out in the country. Well, I got there first, and I'm sitting on the side of the road next to this bridge, and there's a river that runs under the bridge there. And a man pulls up and takes his shirt off. He's got a lot of tattoos on him, and he gets a shovel out of the car. And I'm parked kind of the other side of the bridge, kind of down here on the edge of the trees, and he can't really see me. And I'm like, I'm about to watch him bury a body on the side of the road, this desolate road. But he just starts digging. And then I realize he gets out his equipment and he's got fishing poles and he's digging for worms. That's what he's doing. He's digging for worms to fish with. So I said, okay. I go over there and talk to the guy, and he sees my van, my snake van. He's like, oh, man, you got snakes? I'm like, no, we're here to do some film work. We're scouting a location out to film. And he said, yeah, man, If you go down under the bridge and you go just a little way south down this river, the water moccasins down there are huge. I said, really? I said, that's like one of my favorite snakes, the cottonmouth, the water moccasin. He said, oh, they're huge. He said, I mean, they're down there, and a friend of mine goes in there and kills them. Like, why is he killing them? He said, because they're so big. He said, every time he goes, he finds them. He found that they're eating the raccoons. I said, the cottonmouths are eating raccoons? He said, yeah, they're like this big around. They're massive. Now, a cottonmouth can't get that big around. It can't eat a raccoon unless it's a little tiny baby raccoon, okay? And I'm just like, this is so outlandish and far-fetched. He's not living in reality, okay? I cannot tell him, well, cottonmouths, a big one is going to be like that big around. That's a big cottonmouth, a big 5-foot cottonmouth or so is going to be that thick. They're not going to be this big. They can't be that big. It's genetically impossible. He's not going to understand that. He's not going to grasp this, okay? So I just take a different tactic. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's how this river system is. As a matter of fact, you're digging for worms. You know where you should be digging. He's like, where? I said, under the bridge. Those rocks under the bridge, you move those rocks. The worms there, big around as my forearm, they're massive. He said, you got to be kidding me. I said, no, they're huge. He said, well, how would I fish with a worm that big? I said, well, what you do is you catch one worm and you just cut it up into pieces and you fish with it. You don't have to catch, out here digging, catch 50 worms digging. Just go there and get you one worm and you're good to go. He's like, oh, man. He goes under the bridge. And so he never came back up. Maybe one of the big worms or maybe one of the big cottonmouths ate him. I don't know. I had a guy last night at the fair come up after my show, and he was telling me of a 12-foot rattlesnake that he found. Well, the eastern diamondback rattlesnake is the largest rattlesnake in the world, and I don't know what the record is for that thing. I read one time somewhere there was one measured 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that was like 8 feet or just over 8 feet or something. That's massive. I can't imagine that. Now, I've seen rattlesnakes in captivity, 7 feet plus, which is a massive snake. I mean, a giant snake for a rattlesnake. But he tells me he found one that's 12 foot long. And this is impossible. It's genetically impossible for one to get that big. So I'm just like, where was it? And he told me the part of Georgia he saw it in. I said, well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense if that's where you saw it. Because I was down there one day. And, they got rabbits down there because eastern diamondbacks, one of their primary food for the adults is cottontail rabbits. I said, the rabbits down there are massive. I said, I saw a rabbit there one time. It was about the size of a Volkswagen. And that guy, really? A Volkswagen? I said, yes, sir. He said, man, that isn't. He didn't question it. If he can believe there's a 12-foot rattlesnake, why can't he believe there's a rabbit the size of a Volkswagen? Okay? It's just as possible. All right? So that's something we get quite often. And sometimes you have to pick your battles and know when not to argue with somebody and just go with it. All right? Now, speaking of identification, there's a lot of misinformation about identification. And, one thing that often gets mixed up is the shape of a snake's head. This is something we get a lot. People will say, oh, well, it's got that diamond-shaped head, the triangular-shaped head, the spade-shaped head, whatever that means. And if you look at the shape of the snake's head, then you can know if it's a venomous snake. Well, first of all, that's not true for all snakes because some snakes don't have that shaped head. Coral snakes don't have it, And, you can go around the world and find snakes that don't. But here in the southeastern U.S., coral snakes is the one venomous snake that doesn't have that diamond or triangular-shaped head. But your venomous ones do, your pit vipers, your copperheads, your cottonmouths, and rattlesnakes. But what people don't understand is that a lot of snakes have a defensive mechanism where they can basically reposition the bone, basically flatten their head out, the bones in their skull, flatten their head out into that same shape that quick. So when you see them, you'll think they're dangerous and just leave them alone. So identifying a snake just by the shape of his head alone is not an accurate way to ID a snake, if that's what you're going by. Then other people will say, well, you can look at their pupils. A non-venomous snake has round pupils, and a venomous snake, a pit viper, has those slit cat-like pupils, right? And if you go on the internet and you search up pit viper pupils, you'll see those slit cat-like pupils. But the thing is, most of those photos were taken in bright light with a flash. The person wanted it to be a good picture, so they used good lighting, and they're all going to be those slit pupils. However, if you go into your shade tree in the backyard in the evening, you find that copperhead cottonmouth or rattlesnake, often you'll see those pupils have dilated and become perfectly round, so they can see better, okay? So we can't always go by the pupils. We can't always go by the head shape. And one thing that's usually more, you hear I say usually, not 100%, usually more reliable is the pattern of a snake. However, when you're identifying snakes, you don't want to go by just one thing. You want to look at a few different things. Now, when we look at snakes and trying to identify snakes, just going back to like what I said earlier about the dogs, looking at a Dalmatian with a white dog with the black spots versus a Rottweiler or a Pit Bull, it's pretty easy to know which ones are which. Those are pretty different looking dogs, okay? However, if you've spent a little bit of time looking at dogs, you can easily pick out, well, this dog is not a full-bred dog, but I see a little bit of this in this dog and this in this dog. And it's kind of the same thing with snakes. Not that we're getting all these inbred snakes, but sometimes you can see a little bit of the characteristic of this or that and kind of narrow it down if the snake is covered in mud or if the picture is not a very good picture and you just can't see it very well. So we can kind of narrow it down as what the snake is. However, one good way, if you're a person who doesn't know how to identify snakes very well and you want to get better at that or learn how to do that, one thing I've always recommended to people is, first of all, don't just start trying to, like this brochure right here, this is a great brochure. Don't just start trying to memorize all of these different snakes. There's a lot of snakes, and this is just the ones that are non-venomous in Georgia. That's just our non-venomous snakes. There's a lot of snakes. And then you open it up, and it's got all of our venomous snakes in Georgia. Now, this can get overwhelming with so many snakes. So what I tell people is, learn your venomous ones first. And not even all of them. There's 6 venomous snakes in Georgia. What I would do is I would pick one venomous snake, and I would go on the internet, and I would look up that snake, and I would look at 100 pictures of that snake, 200 pictures of that snake. And the more you see photos and videos of this particular species, the more you'll recognize head structure, colors, patterns, scale counts, and how they're arranged. And you'll notice these things over time the more you look at it. Then when you see another snake, you may not know what that other snake is, but you'll know whether or not it's the one you've been studying. And the more you do that with snakes, the better off you're going to be. Right now with the internet and, all the resources we have all these Facebook groups that have popped up. And I know here in Georgia, as well as, probably states and all over the world probably have a lot of these, but we have a really good one here in Georgia. And it's a identification group. It's Georgia Snake Identification and Education. A really good group, and they have a lot of admins on there that really do a good job of identifying snakes pretty quickly. And, Sherry's on there. She runs this group really, really well as a ton of other admins that are on this group on here. James and Jen and Vanessa and Ryan and, all of them on there. So they do a really good job with that. But I think what's happened with these ID groups is something that they may not have intended to happen when they started this. And it's a good thing. They started these to help identify snakes. But what's happened is, and you'll see this in the comments on there, is that people will go on there and because this is now popping up in their feed on Facebook over and over and over, they're seeing everyone else's photos of snakes. And so it's helping these people who don't even really want to learn about snakes and learn to identify snakes and realize, oh, okay, these things are not what I thought they were. So instead of just helping a person identify the snake they have, it's basically giving people exposure therapy. Some people I deal with used to not even take my business card if it had a photo of a snake on the card. So I had to take the photo of a snake off just so it's got our logo on there, but not an actual snake photo, because some people won't even take that. They're that scared of snakes. But I think some of those groups have really helped a lot of people overcome their fear and realize, snakes are not the monsters I've always thought that they were, Now, when it gets into identifying snakes, sometimes it can get a little tricky. For instance, I had the state call me one day and said, hey, can we go to this house and can you go with us? Because there's some snakes there that we need you to pick up from this house. And I said, yeah, sure. So I go to the house and we go in the backyard and there's a rabbit pen. And this particular rabbit pen is sitting on the ground. There's no bottom on it, okay? There's sides, there's a top, it's made of wire, and it's sitting on the ground, and there's no wire on the ground. I would think if there was a rabbit in here, he could just dig out and be gone, but there's no rabbit in here. Instead, there are rattlesnakes, and these particular rattlesnakes are albino rattlesnakes, somebody's pets, and something happened. The guy got into a domestic dispute with his wife, and he ends up going to jail for that. And so then they bring us out to come. The wife wants us to come get the snakes. And then when we get there, the state asked me to identify the snakes. I said, well, these are albino rattlesnakes. And specifically, these are Western diamondback rattlesnakes. Now, in Georgia, a Western diamondback rattlesnake, you cannot legally own that. If it's an Eastern diamondback rattlesnake, you can. Let me show you something right here. This is a sculpture of an Eastern diamondback rattlesnake. One day, this all ties in. One day, something popped up, I don't know, on the internet somewhere, and I saw some sculptures of snakes, and they were beautifully made. And I was like, is that mounted? Do they kill a rattlesnake and make this? And that was not the case. And so I started looking through this sculptor's website of all the things that they had on there. And it was just so detailed. And I realized that it was a sculpture, that they were making these by hand. And they were so detailed, amazingly detailed. And what happens is snakes have certain number of scale rows that go across your back, and certain numbers of head scales in a particular pattern. And so sometimes, even if there's no color pattern on the snake, you can actually count the scales and determine, if you know the scale count, and you can determine species and subspecies and so much about a snake. And when I look at these snakes, the scale count and the way that this was made is perfect. It's the way God made it, okay? And it's anatomically correct. I'm like, who did this? I mean, this is just insane. This is crazy. And so I commented about how amazing this was. And I don't know, some time went by, weeks went by, and I was at an event somewhere, and this woman walked up to me. I didn't know who this woman was. She walks up and says, Jason? I said, yeah, hey, nice to meet you. And she said, hey, I'm J.L. Cook. And I was shocked. And because J.L. Cook was the sculptor of this rattlesnake. And I'm like, you're I didn't even know if it was a man or woman, because it was just initials, J.L. Cook. And this woman is like, I'm J.L. Cook. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And she said, yeah, you were talking about my sculpture. And I was just telling her how amazing it was. And I was so surprised when she handed me this as a gift. And I have treasured this. I have treasured this thing for so long. So this is an Eastern diamondback rattlesnake, and she does, go look her up. She does absolutely amazing work, incredible detail on this stuff. And man, so anyway, back to the rattlesnakes in the rabbit pen, these albinos. So I tell them these are albino Western diamondback rattlesnakes, right? And so they asked me to seize the snakes, and they took them. They took the snakes. Well, then, a week or so goes by, and they call back and says, hey, listen, the guy is telling us that you have misidentified these snakes. And I said, no, I didn't. Those are Western diamondback rattlesnakes. He said, no, he's telling us these are Eastern diamondback rattlesnakes that are albinos. I said, well, he can tell you what he wants. If you're asking my opinion is these are Western diamondbacks. And they said, well, we kind of need to figure this out, Jason. They said, because if they're Western diamondbacks like you claim, he's going to be charged with this, and we have to seize the snakes. If they're Eastern diamondbacks like he claims, then we can't charge them, and we have to give him these snakes back. So as far as the state keeping the snakes or taking the snakes, that's not my fight. But they're claiming that my identification is wrong and that basically I don't know what I'm doing. So now I've got to protect my reputation here. And so I said, well, I will, let me see the snakes. I want to take some photos of them. Not to see if I was right. I know I was right. But I want to take photos, and I'm going to do a scale count of these snakes, and I'm going to show you some things of how you can determine that this is a Western diamondback and not an Eastern. And we even went into some things about the stripe coming down the side of the eye on the Eastern, and it kind of comes down at a different angle on the Western diamondback. So I had to write out a whole description explaining why this was a Western diamondback rattlesnake and not an Eastern diamondback rattlesnake like this is, okay? And then, it kind of got me off the hook and let them know that, okay, he does know how to identify these particular snakes. Now, another sculpture that I have is this thing right here behind me. This is not mounted. This is an American alligator. This is a leucistic American alligator, and it is pretty amazing, this little guy. And somebody hand molded this. Can you believe it? This is not mounted. This is a hand molded. His name is Aaron. He's got a shop on Etsy. He sells these on. He's a friend of mine on Facebook, and he does amazing. He does some stuff for movie and film work. And I did not ask for this alligator. Now, I've got two of these. The other one that I have, and you've probably seen it in some of my YouTube videos, it sits on the dash of the Venom Van, and it's like vulcanized rubber. It's very tough material. You can't destroy it hardly, like really tough. And the other one that sits on the dash of the Venom Van is just a normally painted, normal-looking American alligator, the normal color. And so when I ordered that, Aaron sent me this one as a gift, and this is amazing. This is a I can't even say it, a leucistic, not albino, a leucistic American alligator replica, and this is absolutely amazing. And he goes in, and I don't know, I think some of his videos I've seen him use clay, and I know other videos he uses wax. So I don't know which medium he used to make this with. Now, this is not clay or wax. Once he makes the sculpture, what he does then is he puts in a mold or something somehow, and then he can make it into whatever material he wants. This particular leucistic is actually foam. This is very, very light. The other alligator, that's the black one, the normal colored alligator that sits on the dash of the Venom Van, that one is the vulcanized rubber that's really tough and really hard. And so he can make these things out of different stuff. This is just very light, but it looks absolutely amazing. And he goes in, he counts the scales, he counts the patterns, and makes this alligator anatomically correct. And it is absolutely, I mean, that is just amazing, the detail. If you want to see the detail on this thing, that is absolutely incredible. Look at that. And people think I've killed a gator and mounted it, and it's not. This is so cool. So that is, we'll stick him right over there. Sit there, fill it. Now, yes, the snakes, alligators, just like, we have 5 fingers, alligators have certain features on them. Snakes have certain features on them, and it can vary by species, okay? And so certain number of these scoots that go across the back of the neck are things that we look for to identify snakes and alligators and crocodiles and caimans. Now, one more thing I want to show you real quick is these skins right here. Now, I did not kill these. Let me tell you, this is actually pretty cool. So, when you're identifying skins or live animals or whatever, there's certain features that you look for to identify them. Now, these are actually real skins. And let me tell you where these came from. What happens is people will often travel outside the country or across the country, and they may purchase alligator skins, crocodile skins, skins of the caimans in Central and South America. And they bring these skins back on the plane illegally. And customs checking things out will find these, and if they don't have the proper tags, see this one has a tag, looks like from Florida. So a lot of times, once these are seized, then the tag will be added to this after it's seized if it doesn't have a tag on it. That tag has to remain on there for us to be transporting these things anyway. And but what they can do, they can actually count the scoots, these ridges, these scales basically, across the back and see the arrangement of these scales that are on the neck of the crocodilian, and that can help determine exactly what species we're looking at. And there's also some of them that we can look at the scale pattern on the base of the tail, like in between the back legs across the back. That can help us differentiate between different species of crocodilians as well. And so there's so much detail in this stuff. Now, where did I get all these skins? If you are an educator and you're a legit educator, you actually really do education and teach people about reptiles. If you get approved, you can do something called cargo for conservation. This is through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Out in Colorado, there's a huge, giant warehouse of all this kind of stuff, okay? Everything you can imagine, rhino horns, elephant tusks, alligator skins, animal parts that have been seized from people who had them illegally. Either they were poached or just being transported illegally. And those things are stored in this warehouse. And they're just sitting there wasting away until educators who get qualified and are approved qualify for cargo for conservation. And then they will send you boxes of this stuff to teach with, okay? That's where I got this. So this stuff does not belong to me. This is property of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but it is on permanent loan to Southeastern Reptile Rescue. So that's where we get that stuff from. So really cool if that's something you want to look into. Now, as far as going back to seeing these snakes and recognizing them, just like we talked about the Facebook groups, how you can go on there and these snake photos are popping up on your screen all the time. The more you see them, the more you're exposed to them, the more you become familiar with them. And then it becomes a little bit easier over time to see, as you're going down the road, a snake on the side of the road that may have just been hit and you're doing 70 miles an hour and you just see it for a second. You can actually, oh yeah, I know what that was. You can identify them because you've seen them so much and you just recognize one little feature real quick and you know which snake that was. That's possible to do, but you have to spend time looking at snakes. One way this works, Coca-Cola, if you travel around the world, it does not matter where you go. You go to a third world country somewhere, you know what you will see? A Coca-Cola sign. They are all about brand recognition. They're all about the more you see it, the more you know what it is, the more you recognize it, okay? Even if you've never drank a Coke before in your life, you see that sign, you know what it is. Same thing with snakes. The more you see it, you will know what it is eventually if you keep looking at them. Some people don't want to look at snakes, But if you get on these Facebook groups and you're kind of exposed to that over time, it makes it a lot easier. Now, if you're listening to this podcast and not watching it on YouTube, some of this stuff I'm showing you, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But anyway, I think some of this stuff you kind of have to see. But I'm trying to make it where you can listen to this and not have to watch it. Hopefully, I'm doing an okay job of that. Now, let's go into one more thing. And we're going to get ready to close this out here soon. But I have a couple more stories, and a couple of these are kind of funny stories I want to tell you. I'm saving the best stuff for last, okay? Mistaken identity. Mistaken identity. Now, we deal with this a lot. One thing that happened to me years ago was I was sound asleep, and my phone rings at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it is 911. They said, Jason, we need you at a gas station right now. There's a situation going down, and they've kind of reached the limit of what they can do, and we need you here. So basically, here's what happened. There is a woman, a single woman. She's an older lady, and she's living in Michigan, and she wants to go to Florida. Well, if you know anything about Michigan and Florida, you'll know that those two states are connected by Interstate 75, okay? Interstate 75 runs from Michigan straight to Florida. Well, this woman drives all night by herself in her minivan from Michigan to Florida. And around 4 a.m., she's making it into Georgia. She's just south of Atlanta, down close to where I live. And as she's driving at 4 a.m., a snake crawls across her foot inside her minivan. Okay? Fortunately, she did not flip the minivan on the interstate. She managed to keep her composure, get off an exit, and pull over to a gas station at 4 a.m., and she jumped out of the vehicle. She leapt out of the vehicle, slammed the door, and said, call 911. Local police department comes out. They open the door, and they don't find a snake. They find 7 or 8 snakes that are all in this van. And they are killing them left and right because these are copperheads. At least that's what they think. Misidentified. They have misidentified these snakes as copperheads. What really happened? This woman had a cardboard box in her garage, or I don't know what it was, in her garage, a shed or something, and she picks it up, puts it in the back of her minivan, does not know, there's a bunch of snakes in it. Apparently, here's what it appears. It appears there was a female with a bunch of male. These were northern water snakes, okay? Northern water snakes. With water snakes, the females are bigger. The males are smaller. And there's this one big female water snake gets into this box, and as she does that, she's releasing a pheromone. All these male water snakes follow her into the box, and they're in the bottom of all this storage stuff, and this woman picks up a box of her stuff with a bunch of snakes in it and puts it in the back of her van. The stuff nightmares are made of for some people. This would be awesome for me. It'd be awesome. But anyway, for her, it's not. So the police department's there. They have shot, I want to say 7 or 8 snakes. By the time I get there, they're dead. I pull up on scene. They've closed the gas station down. There's several police cars there. They have an ambulance on site in case anyone gets bit. There are dead snakes all around the parking lot. Copperheads, so they think. These are harmless, non-venomous northern water snakes. And they've woken me up at 4 o'clock in the morning to come do this. So not only did I have to get up out of bed, now I have to see all these dead snakes that they've misidentified, and they killed these things. So they said, look, there's one snake left, and it happens to be the biggest one, which I now know is the female. All these other ones are smaller, about 2 or 3 feet long. And they said it has gone up under the dash and has crawled up in the electronics of the dash. And if we separate the dash where the radio is, he's inside the dash on top of the radio under the dash. And we can pull it up enough to see him. They're sticking screwdrivers in and prying the dash up. How do they find the snake? I have no idea. But they pry the dash up, and you can look in there and you can see this water snake. And I said, well, guys, there's no magic way to get them out other than I'm going to have to reach my hand in there and pull the snake out. He says, you know this is a copperhead. Now, I have not told them that this is not a copperhead because I'm thinking, you know, they're going to wake me up at 4 a.m. They're going to kill all these snakes. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with these guys. So I'm like, yeah, it's a big one too. I said, but you don't understand how fast I am. I don't care if it's a copperhead. These hands are so freaking fast. I'm going to reach in there. I'm going to pull the snake out before he knows what's going to happen. He's not going to have time to bite me. Cop thinks I'm crazy. They move everybody back. I reach in there, and these big old hands barely fit into my pockets. Sure don't fit into this dash, this little thing we're prying up to get my hand in there. So I squeeze my hand in very slowly, trying to press my hand in, and I'm able to get my fingers on this thing and start pulling him out. And if you've ever dealt with non-venomous water snakes, they are not sweet, they are not friendly, they are non-venomous, they are harmless, but they will bite the mess out of you over and over and over again, which is exactly what this snake started doing. And also, these snakes, these water snakes, they have an anticoagulant in their saliva. What that means is when these snakes bite you, the bite's not bad, but it just bleeds a lot. It looks really bad. But then when you wipe the blood off, you're like, oh, where did he bite you? Like you can barely see where the little teeth went in, okay? And so he is just lighting me up, biting. There's blood coming out. The cops start screaming. They pull their guns. They point their guns. Drop the snake! Drop the snake! And I'm like, they're about to shoot me and shoot this snake, okay? And so if I don't drop the snake, they're going to shoot me. Well, if I drop the snake, they're going to shoot the snake. So I have to tell them, sorry, sir, I misidentified it. It's not a copperhead. It's a harmless water snake. They did not see the humor in it that I did. But fortunately, we saved this snake from them killing it, okay? Which, you know, anyway, that was mistaken identity, and the snakes, unfortunately, had to pay for that, except for this one snake that we did catch and get out of there. Speaking of law enforcement, mistaken identity, I got a call one night because there was a sheriff's deputy. He was off duty. He was driving in his county, going home, and crossing the road in front of him was a snake. You know, if you pay attention, snakes cross the roads all the time. Most people don't pay attention and just run over them. But he was paying attention because he likes snakes. He knows about snakes, you know. And he looks and he says, oh my gosh, that's a ball python. Somebody's pet ball python has escaped and is crossing the road. How does he know it's a ball python? Because he has a ball python, okay? He has his own pet ball python at home. So he gets out to rescue the snake out of the road, and he realizes something really bad. It's already been run over. It's dead. And he hates that because ball pythons are such nice snakes. They're so friendly. And so he nudges the snake with the end of his flip-flop that he's wearing to make sure it's already dead. And it was not dead. It was injured and scared. And so it bit him and latched onto his big toe and would not let go, which kind of scared him, you know. He thought it was dead. So he goes to kick the ball python off of his big toe with his other foot, and it let go and then bit the pinky toe on his left foot. And it hurt. And now he realizes maybe this is not a ball python. It was not. It was a copperhead, okay? And so I went to the hospital, and I actually took a photo of him, and he's got his big toe on one foot has a snake bite. His pinky toe on the other foot has a snake bite, all because he misidentified a copperhead as a ball python, which is pretty common. Someone else called me and said, hey, Jason, I don't know what to do, but my neighbors have snakes, and 2 of their snakes have escaped, and I don't want to take the snakes into my apartment. I don't have anywhere to put them. He said, now I like snakes. He said, I don't want to see them hurt. He said, but my neighbor is not home, and I live in a duplex. They live right next door, and I don't know their phone number. They're at work. I don't want their snakes, something to happen to them. I'm about to leave to go to work. Can you come get these ball pythons? And I said, yeah. He said, there's 2 of them, and they're laying on my sidewalk. They're both laying here. I said, well, how do you know they're ball pythons? He said, well, have them out here all the time. They'll lay them out here, and we'll come out and take pictures of them. And they always have them out here. I guess they've escaped and come back out here on the sidewalk again. He said, I'll pick them up and just hold them till you get here. I said, no, don't pick them up and hold them. Why don't you just sit on the porch and watch them, just enjoy the sidewalk till I get there? He said, okay, that's a good idea. I get there. It was 2 copperheads. It was not ball pythons. The neighbors' ball pythons had never escaped. They're in their enclosures. And there's just 2 random ball pythons. There's 2 random copperheads on his sidewalk. I don't know if they were getting ready to breed or as a breeding pair or whatever it was. They're just laying out here. And he mistook these for ball pythons and was going to pick them up and hold them till I got there, okay? But he knows the snakes, apparently. So another call that we got one time was there was some snakes in a house that someone asked me to identify, and they called and said, hey, can you identify this snake? And it's several snakes. They send me some photos. I'm telling them, yeah, this is this, this is this. And one of the snakes said, yeah, this one's really pretty. This is they're telling me this is a crebo. A crebo, we talked about Eastern Indigos a while ago. A crebo is a Drymarchina. It's related to Eastern Indigos. It's from like Mexico, Central America. It's a big, 5 or 6 foot snake. There's the Texas Indigo, and there's the crebos in Central America, Mexico, South America, wherever they live. And they kind of have this marking on the side of their face that kind of sometimes looks like a teardrop or something, a marking near the eye. And someone sent me a photo of what they thought was a crebo, which is a harmless, non-venomous snake. And I'm like, whoa, that's not a crebo. Do not open that cage and take that crebo out, even though it's beautiful and you want to hold it. That is not a crebo. That is a forest cobra. It also has a marking there, but it's not like the crebo. That one will kill you, okay? Do not touch that. That isn't a crebo. So sometimes we get that. Now, there was another call that we got, and so I've got 2 more. These are my last 2, and these are the last one's pretty funny. This one was a call that came in. No, I'm sorry. This was an email. I got an email from an agency that said, hey, can you tell me what kind of snake this is? And it was a little small snake, and it was coiled up in a coil, and I immediately knew what it was. And so I emailed them back, and I said, that is a Urucoan rattlesnake. Urucoan rattlesnakes are not native to the United States, okay? It's a beautiful rattlesnake, a Urucoan rattlesnake. And I said, that thing is beautiful. And they said, okay, thank you. That's what we're trying to figure out, what snake this is. Thank you for your help. And I said, no problem. And I said, so I see it's from Tallahassee, Florida. I just emailed that back. Well, my phone rings. And they called and said, hey, you just sent us an email and you identified it as a Urucoan rattlesnake, but then you sent another email saying that you thought it was from Tallahassee, Florida? I said, well, yeah. He said, well, these are not native to the U.S. I said, no, it's not. That's somebody's pet snake. I'm assuming from Tallahassee, Florida. He said, how do you know it's from Tallahassee, Florida? I said, well, what happened? He said, there's a snake in Tallahassee, Florida that bit a guy. And FWC went out to identify the snake because he went to the hospital and said, hey, I was bitten by a Urucoan rattlesnake. I need some antivenom. And then they reported that to law enforcement, and law enforcement says, well, Urucoan rattlesnakes are illegal in Florida. We're going to have to go there and seize that snake because he can't have that. He doesn't have a venomous reptile license. So they go to the guy's house, and somebody says, I don't have the snake anymore. I killed the snake. I chopped it up into pieces and threw it in the lake over here. That's what his story was. And somebody else there said, no, he didn't. He didn't do that at all. He gave it to his brother, and his brother has already driven back home to Georgia. And that's where the Urucoan rattlesnake is. So that's what they told me. And he said, so we've got agents at this guy's house in Georgia right now trying to see if this is a unicorn rattlesnake from Tallahassee. And this guy's telling us he ain't never been to Tallahassee. He don't know what we're talking about. And this is not a unicorn rattlesnake, and it's never been to Tallahassee. How do you know it's from Tallahassee, Florida? I said, well, it's in a 10-gallon aquarium. And it's sitting on top of a Tallahassee newspaper they're using for bedding. So anyway, cracked that case wide open. All right. So the last one I want to tell you about was a situation that we got. This was many, many years ago. And I was asked to go to a house to go in and identify some snakes. Okay. And before we went to the house, they said, look, we just got this FedEx package off of a truck. And we want you to open this FedEx package. We want you to open it, and we want you to see what's in this package. And on the top of this FedEx box, it says 10 ball pythons, because you can ship ball pythons, and so it says 10 ball pythons. They said, we got a warrant for it, so you cut it open. We don't know what's in there. So I don't care that it says 10 ball pythons. That does not matter to me. I'm going to open this box as if it has 100 black mambas and at least 10 king cobras. That's how I'm going to open it, as if that's what's in here, okay? Because it may be ball pythons or it might be certain death. I don't know. So I cut open the tape very easily. I'm using my hook and my tools. I open the box, and inside this box that says 10 ball pythons are 15 pillowcases. Inside each pillowcase is one gaboon viper. Gaboon viper is the largest fangs of any snake in the world, the largest venom yield of any snake in the world was in there. So then when they say, okay, can you go in the house and tell us what these snakes are? And man, I was there for 10 hours in this house. And I did not count them all, but I want to estimate there were between 3,000 to 4,000 reptiles in this house. And I had to go through and tell them what each one was. This took 10 hours. That's how long I was there. So we're there going through these snakes. There's a bunch of legal stuff. There's a bunch of illegal stuff. There's a bunch of venomous stuff, a bunch of exotic venomous stuff. There's all kind of snakes from all over from around the world. There's snakes there. And it's my job to tell them what these snakes are, to identify all these species. So we're going through there, and we're almost done, but there's 10 snakes left. There's 10 left out of 3,000 or 4,000. We're down to 10. And these last 10 snakes are all the same species. They're all identical. They're all about this long. And they're brown with like no markings on them. And I've never seen them before. I mean, there's a few thousand snakes in the world. I don't know all of them. I don't. I'm sure some people do. I don't know them all. And it's my job to tell them what these are. And so I just I don't want to tell them. I don't know what it is. I can't make something up, okay? I have to be able to tell them so they know whether to take them or not take them. Are they venomous? Are they not venomous? Are they dangerous? Will they kill us? Will they not? So I'm like, okay, guys, can y'all just give me a break? Let me just walk outside. I just need a break for a few minutes. I've been doing this for a long time, hours here. Just give me a break for a few minutes. So I walk outside the house, and I'm just walking around the house thinking, what kind of a snake is that? I've never even seen this snake. What is that? I'm just not familiar with this snake. And as I'm walking around the house, I see a dog house. There's a dog house for their dog in the backyard. I noticed the dog house kind of looks a little weird. It looks like it had been brand new. They just built this out of fresh wood. They had not even painted it yet. But the weird thing, what looked weird about this, was somebody had taken a marker and had written all over this doghouse. So I'm curious, what is written all over that doghouse? So I'll get over there to it, and it's a different language. It's not English. It was Latin. It was Latin names, the scientific name of all these animals. It was the shipping container. They had shipped in snakes from Africa in this big crate, and decided, well, I don't want to waste this wood. They cut it up and made a doghouse out of it and never painted it. And so I started reading all these scientific names, and most of these scientific names I recognized. I was like, oh, yeah, that's that. And, the Bitis gabonica, Bitis rhinoceros, all these different snakes. And then I saw one that I was like, well, I've never read that. What is that? And I Googled it. And those 10 snakes, a picture of them popped up. So, armed with my newfound knowledge, I go back in the house. I say, okay, guys, let's finish this up. I have a lot to do today. All right, where were we? These snakes here. Let's see. That's oh, yeah, I know what those are. That's a rufous beaked snake from Africa. They're like, wow, we've never heard of that. I said, oh, yeah, it's just a rufous beaked snake. Like, well, is it venomous? I said, well, it is venomous, but it's not dangerous to people. It has a very mild venom that's not dangerous to us, even though you can go look up on the internet and you can see people who have been bitten by these. There's a couple photos on there that make it look like something I would not want to be bit by, because apparently you can have a reaction to it. So anyway, they decided to go ahead and seize those snakes as well. But anyway, that was my rufous beaked snake story. So, sometimes you got to fake it till you make it, even though you don't know all the snakes. If you spend enough time looking at them, over time you will condition yourself to notice little different things here and there to be able to identify snakes better and better and better. Guys, I hope you have enjoyed this episode number 7 of the Snakes Are Us TV podcast. This has been a lot of fun for me. Hopefully it's been fun for you. And one more thing before I go. Jesus loves you, and so do I. We'll see you in episode number 8.